Did you know that you could be unconsciously holding yourself bound to a vow, oath, or covenant from a past life? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain how you can discern if you do have any active vows from a past life, whether it would be better for you to resolve it or to update it, and how you could resolve or update it. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Charmed Life YouTube channel. This channel is all about magic, mysticism, metaphysics, and the unconditional love of the universe. And I am Tricia Carr. I'm your host here. I'm a spiritual teacher, an empathic channel and medium, and I'm an animal and nature telepath. And also what comes into play in this particular video is that I'm a hypnotherapist. I'm also an ordained metaphysical minister, and that just kind of plays into this whole topic of this particular video. And so if you do enjoy this video, I would love to invite you to like, subscribe, share it with someone else, share it with your friends, and do please click the bell so that you can get notifications when I release another video. I'm also on Instagram, I should tell you that, so do follow me there for some more juicy spiritual content. Okay, well, let's talk about those past life vows, any that may be holding you back because you're unconsciously carrying them over from a previous life. Now, I want to let you know that there are actually two companion pieces with this video. First of all, there is the next video that's coming out that's going to be on past life oaths and covenants. I'm going to do an overview of that, but we're going to dig into them in the next video, so keep an eye out for that. But also on my podcast, just the audio version, we have an episode that takes a deep dive into soul contracts, which kind of plays into all of this past life stuff, and, well, soul contracts being the pre-birth experience as well as potential past life content. And so that podcast actually includes an excerpt from a workshop that I did in my Mystic Arts Academy. So it's some kind of exclusive content. I hope you'll check it out. Let's break down, just to preface the vows section, the difference between a past life vow, oath, or covenant, and how you can discern signs that you are unconsciously binding yourself to one of those kinds of past life promises. Okay, well, the difference between a vow, an oath, and a covenant. So to set the stage for this video and the next one, let me just say that a vow refers to a thing or a concept, and an oath refers to a person. Now, we're going to talk about vows in this episode. And so, for example, a vow of celibacy, which is one of the vows we're going to look at, one of the common vows. A vow of celibacy, that's about a thing or about the concept of celibacy. So you're making a promise to a concept. And then an oath would be a promise to or about a person. So that might be a sworn oath that you will take care of an ailing relative. That would be a promise to or about a person. And, side note, by the way, we call them wedding vows, but actually wedding vows are more oaths because we're making a promise to a person. And I think part of the reason they're still called vows is because that's what the church ordination calls, like taking your nun or priest vows, and those are about a thing. And so they're kind of like just grouping it all together. It doesn't matter. We can still call them vows. It's just colloquial at this point, though. So a vow is something that we actually swear, and we are bound to it by our own honor, by our own sovereignty. And that may also include your sovereignty to a higher power or God or, whatever, or a church, whatever that might be. But it really is about your own honor as opposed to a covenant. So a covenant is actually a legally binding agreement. So a covenant is something that you swear in accordance to a governing agency. Now, that could be a church, but it's usually the law. Usually the law of the land is what covenant really means. There are times of our past where the law and the church were the exact same thing. Now, an oath is a pledge or promise that you make with kind of like a vow to yourself, but you also make it usually to God or church or king or another person to attest that there is a statement that you are going to bind yourself to. I will take care of this ailing relative. I swear to honor my mother and my father. You know what I mean? Like those kinds of oaths that you would actually swear, but it's not legally binding. It is personal. It is a personal oath that you take that is, but it's binding by, there's also blood oath, which is a whole different thing, and you find those in the Old Testament of the Bible. So it is that kind of sworn promise, but then they actually seal it with, blood or something else that's maybe a sacrifice. So anyway, just to give you an overview, because even the outdated or the old-fashioned, we're talking about antiquity when we're talking about soul history or the past life resource. Let's get into vows now. These are the most common vows that have been taken in history of humankind, the most common ones, and some that are still taken in certain churches and everything, different kinds of religions, but these are ones that could be carried, the most common ones you would be carrying through from past lives. And we're going to talk about how you can discern if you are unconsciously binding yourself to a past life vow. All right, the first one we're going to talk about, first most common, not necessarily in any order, but first most common vow from past life that you could be holding is the past life vow of poverty. Yeah, that's an unfortunate one, isn't it? This can mean that you are, poverty doesn't necessarily mean that you're starving to death in the vows that have been taken in, historical times and in current times even. Priests in the Catholic Church, they may take a vow of poverty, and what that really means is a humble life, that you would be avoiding extravagances. It can mean that from just avoiding extravagances to living with the most minimal of necessities. There are Tibetan Buddhist monks who live with very humble clothing, and then even like the male monks will shave their heads, so that's one less thing that they have to deal with in a material sense. But in addition to that, as I understand, they also shave the head so that the thought energy doesn't get stuck there, and it's one less thought energy capture that they have to be concerned with. Or it can be some kind of extreme ritualistic fasting that's a part of your life, and even nakedness. There are some monks, even today, who live completely naked as to deny material possession. So again, it can be from avoiding extravagant life to living very minimally to even like to the brink of starvation to very, very minimal living. So these are all this is the shades of poverty that this vow could encompass. Now with the vow of poverty, you may have owned nothing at all, nothing yourself. Everything that you had was something that was owned by the church or the government, usually, again, the church. Let's just call it the church, shall we? But, like everything you were devoted to actually not having anything that belonged to you. And it also could be living under the roof of your family. So let's say that you didn't actually move out of your home, but that kind of, some of these blend over one to another, but you could be sort of doubling down on this, because if you lived under your family's household and you never moved on, in the olden times it was like you had to create your own family in order to move on from your family, then that could have doubled onto it this vow of poverty. So in priestly and nunly settings where there's a vow of poverty, sometimes there is absolutely nothing that is considered ownership. So you see how you could be beholden to something over yourself in order to maintain your poverty. Now, some signs that you could be binding yourself unconsciously to a past life vow of poverty, that might be that you're unable to feel comfortable with prosperity, that it makes you uncomfortable, or even that you have a discomfort with people who are wealthier, or it makes you feel threatened, or it makes you feel uncomfortable, or it makes you feel put down upon, and in some way that you have some resistance or dissonance with wealth, either for yourself or for others, just a discomfort with prosperity, that you have a difficulty of creating and maintaining prosperity, even though you want to, you have a desire to, or if it's creating a lot of discomfort in your life that you can't maintain prosperity. And it could also be that you're unable to be an entrepreneur or financially independent despite the strong desire to do so. You see, as I was saying, in a past life vow of poverty, it could have been that you didn't own anything yourself. Everything was owned by the church. And so if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be financially more independent, but you find yourself beholden to always having an employer and it feels oppressive to you, then it could be that carryover from that old vow. Now, this is important because it's really true for any of this information we can pull from our past lives about vows, oaths, covenants, and maybe some other things. And that is that just because you have a vow of poverty, for example, from a past life, it actually could work for you. It could be that it is unconsciously, you're binding yourself to it unconsciously, but you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You may just need to update it. So this is something we're going to talk about. Do we resolve it, dissolve it entirely as we review it, or do we just update it? We bring it into the light and we say, you know what, something about this works for me. I'm going to do it consciously now. I'm going to do it with awareness. And you might think, how could poverty benefit you? Well, what if you are a person who enjoys living very simply, to not having a lot of possessions, maybe, living in nature, living off the grid, having just what you need to be very, comfortable, but being meager or being simple or minimalistic makes you comfortable, makes you happy. That might be a positive vow of poverty that you're carrying over from a past life. You could have been a nun in provincial France having the best time. It could have been a beautiful life. So it's not all bad. But it could be that if you're a little confused about it, it could be that if you're confused because you're like, why do I like this when the rest of the world says go, 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 and I'm supposed to be ambitious and everything? Maybe you aren't supposed to be ambitious. So see how you can bring it into the light and embrace it and have a wonderful time with it. It could be that you're a person who loves to, maybe you do have resources, and it's, you have income or you have inheritance or whatever it is that is resourceful to you, and you love giving it away to charity so that you stay at a more humble means of materialism. That could be a really beautiful way to experience a past life vow of poverty. Poverty, it's like a bad word, but it doesn't have to be. It can be just not, you don't really like extravagances and that feels right to you. Or perhaps you do love to be employed. You love to have your finances kind of involved with an agency or an organization, a corporation, or, your family, government, whatever it is. Perhaps that's actually really, you like to be able to work that way. And so then to realize that this is your uplifted, enlightened way to carry out your vow of poverty from a past life. But it could be really cool to resource a life where it worked for you in order to highlight how it works for you now. So as I get to the other two vows, common vows, I will explain how you can kind of sense a little deeper if dissolving the vow altogether or if just updating the vow is better for you. And so that was the vow of poverty. Now let's look at the past life vow of celibacy, or chastity as it's often called. The past life vow of celibacy. Now, you may be thinking, well, it's really obvious if you have a vow of celibacy. That's for people who don't have sex or have way too little sex. And it's not actually as simple as that. The unconscious response to being bound to a past life vow of celibacy, it's actually more complex than just being celibate, than just abstaining from sexual activity. In the current Catholic Church, the vow of celibacy doesn't necessarily mean that they're completely unmarried. I think that's very Western, but I read that in the Eastern sect that some of the priests are actually married, and that's okay. So anyway, I'm not an expert on Catholicism at all. But anyway, just to understand that when we hear these words, chastity doesn't necessarily mean 100% you're a virgin your whole life. However, it may mean that. But anyway, how it gets really complex when we are unconsciously responding to a past life vow about this, it could be many different ways that we're responding. It could be that we are sexually anorexic. It could be that a person is rebelling against that oppression, and so they sexually binge or they're sexually overactive. Now, some people may be thinking, I don't know how you can be sexually overactive. I know that's how some people feel. However, if it is interfering with your health, well-being, or if it's harming yourself or others in some way, that's how. If it's something that is not benefiting you. And could be that you are, if you're holding an unconscious bind to a past life vow of celibacy or chastity, it could be that you sort of prize a certain kind of sexuality or lack thereof as if it's more moral. So what does that sound like? That sounds like, well, maybe if a person is slut shaming, that kind of thing. Like you should be celibate or you should be really chaste. You shouldn't have sex before marriage. And maybe some people like that maybe you kind of think, if you just feel that way about yourself, that's different. But if you're judging other people, then that's where we're crossing a line where it's unhealthy. Or it could be that, of course, homophobia or something along those lines. Or if a person really has a hard time coming out of the closet, if they are, if they do have a certain kind of sexuality that is tended to be thought of as outside of what society or family or somebody thinks is the better or the more moral one, having that difficulty could be a part of the past life out. Now, of course, it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard because of the societal constraints and judgment. However, it could be that you rehearsed some of those difficulties in a past life, to be able to have that strength to be able to move the lesson forward in this life, to come out or something along those lines. Like I said, and the reason I would say about, having a certain, prizing, thinking that a certain sexuality type is more moral for yourself and for others, is because a part of the vows of celibacy where they actually allowed the what are they called? I can't remember what they're called, priests and nuns, but there's a particular word for it, that they can actually be married, is that they usually said that they could only be married inside a heterosexual marriage, that was the only thing that was allowed. In addition to that, they said that marriage was for people who didn't have the strength to be celibate, because celibacy is the higher spiritual state. So, you know what I mean? So all of those things are just kind of shaming people into a certain type of sexuality, which may not be natural for them, which may not light them up or align with them. So you see how any reaction to something that's extreme, particularly judgmental of yourself or another, could be a carryover from a past life vow of celibacy. Now, this could include the rebellion or the difficulty if there are deviances, sexual deviances that harm yourself or others. It could also include a difficulty committing to a partner when you really want a partner. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody has to want a partner, a life partner or a romantic partner to whatever length. But if you really want one and that feels aligned with you, you're having a hard time with that, it could be because of that carryover of the past life vow of chastity. It could be also that basically, if there's any, and let's sum it up by saying any extreme behavior or any extreme pattern regarding sex or romantic partnerships that makes you uncomfortable, disrupts your life, harms yourself or others, or if there is judgment, blame, shame, and guilt. If there's any content around that, then we could possibly resource what happened in the past life vow of celibacy. Now, you can update your celibacy vow. You can. If you have a celibacy vow that you resource from another life, you can see if it actually works for you and that there's just some of it that needs to be brought into the light. How? Well, perhaps you have this feeling that marriage is the best thing and you have to be married your whole life, but maybe it's a little bit more natural to you to be polyamorous. That could be a way that you actually update what has happened with your celibacy vow. It's going to be, rather than a rebellion of cheating and stuff like that, that's actually creating harm and emotional pain, then maybe you can find a way to loosen that up. A person could be asexual. I don't think, or you know what I mean? Be single. A person can say, hey, I do want to have one partner. There is all kinds of way to be romantic or sexual. And if it is healthy for you, if it is a conscious way for you to do it, anything is possible. All right, our third and final most common past life vow is the vow of obedience. The vow of obedience usually has to do with putting the good of fill in the blank above your own personal good. That could be church, company, community, family. That's how it usually plays out. Probably it had to do with church before, of course, but that was the everything. So above your own, though. Now, this is for the betterment of the community and not your own personal benefit. So it can be to a disempowering effect. It might be that you also feel as though having approval from the outside or approval from authority validates who you are. Now, it feels good to be validated. It feels good to be approved. It feels good to be approved. But if it's kind of like you really need that for validation, then that's where we're getting into an unhealthy area. It could be that you're also very concerned about the hierarchy. And that means whether you're on the top or the bottom, like the hierarchy, the boss, and I'm afraid of the boss, or I am the boss, so I'm oppressive, If a person is particularly what I call climby, like they want to climb, and it has that that desperate energy about it, that can be an over response, an overreaction to that oppression that was felt by their previous life's vow of obedience. Now, I would say that some empaths might want to look at this one, because when our empathic nature is disempowering us so that we are thinking and feeling and identifying to everything else to the detriment of our own well-being, we might want to see if we can recall a past life with that vow of obedience so that we can clear it. Now, you can do both. I think this one is one that you can really update a lot of the time, because you can do both. You can serve the community, you can serve others, as well as yourself. The reason why I think you can do both, maybe you need to really adjust yours down so much that it seems like you're dissolving it. Maybe you need to dissolve a specific one from a past life that was very oppressive. But you can, the thing is, serving others comes from serving yourself first. Why? Because of the golden rule. The golden rule is called the golden rule because it is in every major religion. And the way that it's said in the Bible, one of my favorite ways is love thy neighbor as thyself. That means that you have to first love yourself before you can love your neighbor. It means that to the quality and quantity that you love yourself is only how much you can love your neighbor. So I think that this vow of obedience really can be updated as the vow to be of service to others. But that means that your cup has to be full first because of the unity, because of the rule of unity. We're all one. So if my cup is low, then so is the cup of everyone's. So special note here on that vow of obedience. It can be updated, and I think it's one that a lot of us need to look at so that we can get in balance with it. Okay, moving on now, how to review a past life vow. How to see if you have an unconscious binding to a past life vow. Well, the first way that you can do this is by a self-induced state. State means to be altered into the meditative, the self-hypnosis state, to be in the neutral and the high vibrational state. It's always good to have this skill to review it yourself so you can do it anytime, all the time. Now, you can do this by using a guide track. That's still like self-induction, I think. If you use a guided meditation or something like that that will induce you into the state to help you to move along. And by the way, I do have linked in below a meditation. It's a journey that is for soul contracts, but I think it would work well to set you up for this as well. So you do want to be in that altered state that's neutral or high vibrational. We do not want to be in the analytical, victim-identified, judgmental, guilty, blaming. We do not want to be in that state. That's not the state for this. We don't want to be in that seeking our own confirmation bias, like having that bias that I know I'm right about this. It's all, because of this. And we're just seeking to add it to ourselves because, that's just not the way to discover something new. You may be able to kind of easily objectively notice a vow, let's say of celibacy, like the one I said probably seems obvious, but to discern whether you need to resolve it or update it, you want to be altered. You want to be in that positive, altered state. And so, whether you are using a guide track or doing your own meditation, you can lead yourself into that. I also think that using a professional hypnotherapist, intuitive, Akashic record reader, a healer, someone who specializes in seeking out vows, that is great to do, I would say occasionally, once a year, every other year, something like that, because you can go deeper when you allow a practitioner to sort of take the lead. If you can just go with the guidance, maybe you do it more frequently than that. I don't know if you need to do vows like every week or something like that, but who knows? Maybe that would work for you. But so far as working with a practitioner, you probably don't need to do that weekly, but work with the practitioner so that you can let go of the reins and they can guide you to go deeper. Now, resolve or update the vow. That's the question. Well, I want to tell you that awareness is the first step. And sometimes that can take care of everything. Just, oh, well, that's where that was. Phew. And then your energy sort of lets it go. And that's really great when that happens. But sometimes healing needs to be done to be able to change the energetic habit. It can be an ongoing, experience to heal it. It may require some shadow healing from how it actually played out in this life. So you might need to do some of that healing as well. Now, what I think is really cool is to seal it. You might want to have some kind of ritualized ceremony, especially if when you reviewed it in the past life, there was actually a ceremony that you took that vow. So that can mean just, you do a new moon ceremony where you set an altar and then you do something. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can create a ritual for yourself that is so beautiful and uplifted to release yourself of that vow. So here are some examples of questions you can ask yourself as you're discovering this vow, to see if you want to, what you need to do with it, update it or resolve it. Questions to ask yourself. Is there a way that this old promise can benefit my life? Just ask yourself that as you are in that neutral state. Just wonder about it, ponder about it, talk to your spirit guides about it. Another one, is it possible to update it, to make it a conscious promise, to make it a full awareness promise? Does it interfere with my life, or does it harm others? Can I reframe it? Can I put it in a new light? Would the greatest learning and empowerment come from resolving it or updating it? Be very open and even just like excited if you get surprised about what the answer is. Okay, in conclusion, there is just so much that we can learn from past lives. I mean, it's just like reviewing your life, but it's resourcing your soul's history, and it's fantastic. And if you would like to, by the way, as I said, we have the companions to this, the podcast on soul contracts. And I mentioned that if you want a guide track, you can review your soul contracts. You can check in the description. There's a download link for my meditative journey called Soul Contract Review Trance Meditation. And you can use this, I think, to prime yourself to look at past life vows too. And of course, there's that podcast. And there is, in the next video that's coming up, we will be going deep into past life oaths and covenants that I mentioned at the beginning. We're going to see what those look like. And remember, do please check out my Mystic Arts Academy. I do workshops here twice monthly where you're directly interacting with me on Zoom on subjects like this and so much more. I also hold sacred circles where I am doing reading, healing, and channeling sessions, channeling different entities and collectives. And I'm also leading group meditations there. It is a beautiful community if you subscribe, or you can drop in for a workshop. And so that's what I have for you today. Thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.